This video was sponsored by Brilliant. Hey, happy Friday. This week Vivo got into deep trouble. Huawei said that they could have killed off all the other phone brands except for maybe Apple if only the US had stopped meddling with them. And China might actually get cut off even more chips in the future. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. Okay, my release highlights this week start with the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, Xiaomi's next flagship that offers the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset, an all-new camera setup complete with the big 1-inch camera sensor that we talked about last week, and apparently proper Leica lenses too. Apart from the massive main sensor, the others seem more or less unchanged from last year, but there's apparently also a second generation silicon oxygen anode battery, which I've talked about in my big battery explainer video that you can watch here. And now comes the sad news, this phone has not been announced for a global release yet. Boo. Next, there was the Asus ROG Phone 6 series, with the Pro really pushing everything further again. It has a 165Hz display, the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 processor as well, 2 USB-C ports, and lots of gaming-focused features like shoulder buttons and aggressive cooling. It's expensive at 1,299 euros, with a few missing premium features like wireless charging, fancy cameras, etc., and it only has 2 years of updates, but hey, it's a capital G gamer phone, I guess. Then nothing announced Community Dots, which is, wait for it, a set of membership NFTs, which, yeah, apparently early community investors will get them for free and they can then trade them, which is something, I guess, or you know what, maybe it's just nothing. Anyway, next, Apple unveiled a new lockdown mode for iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and macOS Ventura, which it says is, quote, an extreme optional protection for the very small number of users who face grave, targeted threats to their digital security, and it acts to, quote, harden device defenses and strictly limit certain functionalities that potentially could be exploited by highly targeted mercenary spyware. Apple clearly named the NSO group who made Pegasus and other nasty malware types, which this should apparently defend against, which is very cool indeed. And fun fact, Apple is also suing the NSO group. Good guy Apple, I guess. And finally, the world's first laptop to use the RISC-V open instruction set architecture was reported to start shipping in September as well. The bad news is that the announcement is really weird. The announcement page is just kind of off. There are very few concrete specs, and the company claims that the Roma laptop will be a Web3 friendly platform with NFT creation and publication plus integrated MetaMask style wallet, which, yeah, all that sounds risky, if you get the joke. But hey, maybe it'll be fine. Okay, and for my first story of the week, do you remember how Xiaomi got into deep regulatory trouble in India a couple of weeks ago? Well, it turns out that Vivo is there as well, maybe even in a worse place. There is a money heist, there are gold bars, people are fleeing the country, deleting stuff from their phones. It's getting pretty wild. So the same Indian Enforcement Directorate that punished Xiaomi a few months ago by seizing $725 million for various claimed irregularities now said that it had raided Vivo as well, targeting 48 of the company's locations across the country, seeking to investigate whether Vivo had any significant irregularities in ownership and financial reporting. In a pretty wild statement, the ED said that it seized 119 bank accounts related to Vivo, complete with 4.6 billion Indian rupees, or about $60 million, along with 2 kilos of gold bars, of all things, and a bunch of cash. The Enforcement Directorate is claiming that huge sums of money were remitted to China by Vivo to avoid paying taxes in India, with almost 50% of the total turnover from the country being moved out. Now, I don't know if 50% is a lot, given that the company actually imports most of its components at least, and it also does most of its R&D outside of the country, but hey, that still sounds like a lot. And to make things worse, reports suggest that employees of Vivo India tried to abscond, meaning escaping arrest, and tried to remove or hide devices, and previously it was also reported that Vivo India directors Zheng Shen-o and Zhang Jie left the country last year as well, which is not exactly a sign of confidence. Of course, China isn't exactly thrilled about a second star company of theirs getting cracked down on in what they claim to be unfair treatment, and they also sort of warned that this this would hurt India, pointing at a Chinese automaker, Great Wall Motor, shelving plans to invest $1 billion in a manufacturing plant in India that wasn't approved, which led to them laying off all of their employees instead. According to Counterpoint data, the share of Chinese phone brands hasn't actually changed much in the country, at least until Q1, but there is a lot at stake here and the tensions will continue to be high, it seems. Meanwhile, India has actually been quite successful in convincing or maybe forcing Chinese phone makers to move much of their manufacturing to India by imposing tariffs on them if they don't, and Oppo is apparently leading the charge, so there is a lot at stake for both sides. Now, it's really difficult to say from here whether these crackdowns are just politically motivated or whether they are justified in their nature. Just don't really know yet, but if I was Oppo or Realme, I'd be really sweaty in India right now because, maybe they're gonna come next. Hey, Editing Martin here. While we were editing this video, it turns out Huawei also got under investigation under very similar circumstances. I've left the link to that story down in the description. And now, back to the video. Okay, and my second story of the week is going to be Huawei making a really bold claim, saying that if only the Trump administration had let them alone, they would have wiped the floor with all the Android manufacturers, including Samsung. So Richard Yu, the very bold CEO of Huawei's consumer business group, spoke at an automotive forum in China, where he said the following: "If it weren't for the US intervention and suppression of us, the world's major mobile phone manufacturers might have been Huawei and Apple. I'm not very modest, and this may be the result today." What's even more fun is that Yu specifically dismissed Samsung as a, quote, small manufacturer, which he said would only really be sold in the US and South Korean markets. Which, yeah, that's a bold statement, and obviously Richard is trolling a little here. Samsung is the 26th most valuable public company in the world and the second most valuable electronics manufacturing company after only TSMC, so calling them a small manufacturer is objectively false, but Richard isn't entirely wrong, I think. Just in terms of phones, Samsung was on a clear decline and Huawei on a super strong growth trajectory before the US ban, and all things being equal, these trends might have continued. I've even made a video in the past about how Samsung might have been letting Huawei win given how hard it was to make phones profitably back then, but I think Huawei getting banned is actually part of what made Samsung take their phone business more seriously again in the last year or two, so who knows what would have happened if they hadn't. Now, Richard also said that, quote, "We used to believe too much in the global division of labor and did not enter the field of semiconductor manufacturing. As a result, we were slapped in the face of reality today." Meanwhile, Samsung, I think, had a weak phone business, in part because they focused most of their resources on building up their chip manufacturing business instead, but oh well. Now, another slap in the face for Huawei was losing its partnership with Leica, and following that, now Huawei has announced its own imaging platform called Xmedge, saying that Huawei's next phones will come with the Xmedge logo emblazoned on the back, whatever that might mean. It just doesn't really roll off the tongue like Leica did, I guess. Which leads me to my third story of the week, which is that the US might go even one step further in keeping China from making its own chips. The story is that American officials are lobbying Dutch officials to bar the key chip equipment maker ASML from selling its deep ultraviolet lithography or DUV systems into China. Now, DUV is a slightly older technology than the current cutting-edge EUV or extreme ultraviolet lithography, and it's used to make certain less advanced chips with larger geometries, but it's still heavily used for making chips in things like cars, lower-end phones, computers, and so on. And like EUV, the Dutch company ASML controls most of the market share for DUV machines as well, so blocking those could be a big blow to Chinese chip makers. Now, what is interesting is that Chinese semiconductor stocks actually surged on the news, as the market seems to think that US restrictions could boost homegrown chip equipment makers that could pick up some of the slack eventually, so the outcomes aren't exactly clear, and of course the ban isn't actually finalized yet. That said, ASML has long accused Chinese players of stealing its technology and has even won a few cases against them, while engineers at Taiwan's United Microelectronics were also found to have stolen trade secrets from Micron Technology to sell them to a Chinese state-backed company, so it's unclear whether the bans can even keep key technologies from ever being smuggled into China anyway. This is obviously wildly competitive, and with just one company, namely ASML, dominating the scene, it's easy to see why countries like China would be clamoring for this knowledge, as are basically all countries. Engineering knowledge is clearly a critical resource these days, and learning to become an engineer yourself could put you on a path of being critically important and maybe even critically rich as well. Chips and computer science are the present and the future, and my sponsor Brilliant offers some of the best courses you'll find anywhere to get started with them. Brilliant is the interactive online learning platform for science, computer science, and engineering online, with 11 million students. Their courses are crafted by award-winning teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Microsoft, Google, and more, and they cover topics from beginner to advanced levels. The best thing about Brilliant is the interactive style of teaching that engages you, and also the way that their courses are structured. Courses help you learn by breaking down a complicated concept like the building blocks of computer science into small chunks, and then you do an exercise after each one so you practice what was just explained right away. That ends up building a deeper understanding versus just listening to someone explain a concept without engaging with it. This way you can get better at your job, or maybe get a new job, or just learn something to be smarter. You can sign up for Brilliant for free, and the first 200 people who sign up using brilliant.org/TFC will also get 20% off their annual premium subscription. So check them out, happy learning, and I'll see you next week.